Today, we're going to find out what happens when you turn a simple off-road trip up to 11 and then throw the Stig at it. We'll be driving up a bijou waterfall, tackling some really slippery rocks, dealing with an obesity crisis, and failing to communicate with a feral race thing.
Brakes! Brakes!
Before driving too fast and getting a bit scared.
Good God!
Now, several months ago, I did bring some 4x4s here to Welsh Wales for a little bit of off-roading, though we did suffer several punctures and a little bit of light body damage. And while I love a bit of green laning, I absolutely hate breaking things and having to get out of a nice warm car. So I thought I'd do a remix with some slightly more hardcore versions. So instead of the 2-litre hybrid Defender that I had last time, I've now got a Defender Octa. That's a 4.4-litre V8 with 626 brake horsepower and the self-control of an over-caffeinated toddler. It's more Dakar than Dolgelly, but the thought is there. Then, instead of the Toyota LC250, I've brought the Arctic Trucks AT37. Now this is essentially the same car, but it's got 37-inch tyres, some very sophisticated suspension and a load of chassis mods. Although can a 4-cylinder diesel cope with all of this wheel arch machismo? And then we have the Ineos Grenadier Trial Master by LeTech, which features one of my favourite off-road modifications, and that's portal axles. Now this should make this car, with the 37-inch tyres, even more capable than standard, and this was a vehicle that recently conquered the bony bits of Iceland, so I'm hoping Wales won't be too much of a problem. And then I've got a little bit of a wild card in the shape of this, a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. Now this is our Top Gear Garage long-term test vehicle, and this one's been modified by my colleague Rowan Horncastle with the help of Storm Jeeps. So it's got better suspension, bigger tyres, a winch, different bumpers and a snorkel. We're hoping that this American icon can cope with some Welsh hardcore. And let's face it, a snorkel in Wales is always a good idea. Later on, we'll be heading to an actual Welsh rally stage to see whether these cars can handle the rough stuff when driven a bit quicker. But before I let the driving automaton do his thing, I want to experience what their actual off-road ability is like firsthand. And that involves some relatively challenging byway navigation. Now this is good stuff, not necessarily car killing, but enough to put these cars to a proper UK test. The first obstacle is a deep dip and crawl back up a mini waterfall. Then we move on to some leaning over very tight lanes. Then it's a quick set of slick rock steps before the final challenge of more tight lanes and rocks and back the way we came. The idea is simple. I'm going to drive each car the length of it and see which one copes the best. You lose points for stopping, failing or generally making a meal of things. First up is the Jeep, and Simon is making a return as my official spotter.
It's quite tight down here. But the good thing about the Jeep is it's not actually the biggest car. Now, this car's also got the modified front recovery bumper, which should give us a better approach angle. Beautiful. Oh, you can hear the tyres against everything. Now, this is a big rock step and it's raining, so this is difficult. That's fine. It's just a piece of plastic. It's fine. We're going up. Oh my goodness. The interesting thing about the Jeep is, because it's quite old school, it's very regular in its reactions. So when you're just crawling over something, it makes sense. There's no electronics really fiddling about with it. I'll unlock the diff locks so the transmission can unwind itself. Honestly though, this Jeep is walking it. There's my wheel arch again. It's a sacrificial part, probably. I'm quite impressed with this engine. It's not got the most torque here, but again, the gearing just helps it. And a good bit of off-road driving is patience, and maybe having a walk of your route. I'm going to leave the diff locks off, just to see whether this can walk through here without them. This is mighty, this thing. But I do think the mods basically elevate it. So with that front recovery bumper with that integrated winch, it's always nice to have one. You've got a much better approach angle, which is really helping. So we're not butting the nose into these rock steps. The tyres and the lift help the breakover angle, so we're not grinding out as we go over the tops of things. And then because it's got some standard stuff like being able to decouple the anti-roll bar, I'm getting lots of articulation, so I'm never getting like massive wheels in the air. I've always got something that's got traction, and then with a low box and diff locks, I can basically crawl up anything, and whichever wheel is losing traction just gets locked to the other one, and we can maintain progress without scrabbling around. This is the way I like to off-road. There's very little fuss. Absolutely superb. Knock out my diff locks. Oh, no, I didn't even have them on. And we're gonna go. Oh, we've got one wheel very much in the air. That is genuinely impressive. I like this Jeep.
Next up is the mighty looking Ineos. And this thing is good off-road as standard, so I was interested to see how it would fare with even more intentional suspension.
Now, LeTech is a company that is based in Germany that does a really good line in making already tough cars even tougher. And it's decided to go for it with Ineos Grenadiers, and it is pretty super hardcore. 37-inch tyres and portal axles. The thing with portals is though, it does make the car quite big. So what a portal axle does is it's a set of gears that live in a hub that's about this tall, and the half shafts and the diff are all in a line, and then the portal axles sit on the ends of the half shafts and come down to the hubs on the wheels. So you can lift the centre of the diff, the crown of the diff, and all of the axle further up, so you get much better ground clearance between the wheels. It's really useful if you need to go over stumps and things like that. And the other stuff that a LeTech gets is a really cool, very well engineered roof rack. There's a ladder at the back, there's fuel holders, it's got 37-inch tyres, better wheels, and it feels like a proper piece of kit. The only thing is, it's 170,000 euros, not including local taxes, so it does cost quite a lot. Now we're going into the tippy section. Now this was where the LeTech might suffer, simply because it's a very tall vehicle. Yeah, look at that angle. I'm staring up at trees. These are those slippery stepped rocks. This has got a longer wheelbase. We've got a good approach angle. We've got an absolutely spectacular breakover angle. Absolutely fine. We're just... The car's moving around a little bit because it's just slippery rock. But actually that wasn't a problem. That was just a little bit of a tweak that I needed to do to my line. Big vehicle, and it's working. Because we're so tall, this is going to hit, this is trees. Ooh, give it a bit of... Ooh, this feels tricky in this car.
And if anyone would like to know the tip limit of a portal axle Grenadier, I'd just like to say that I really wouldn't have liked to go any further with that one. Next we have the Arctic Trucks AT37 Land Cruiser 250, known as the Prado in other parts of the world.
Now Arctic Trucks used to be a special equipment division of Toyota itself, so this is actually taking it back to the old school. And you can actually buy, I've just folded in my wing mirror, I'm that close to the bank. Thing is, you can buy an Arctic Trucks AT product from your Toyota dealer, so it's official kit. And this is an AT37, which is essentially just big wheels and lift it up a bit and that's it, right? Well, no, not exactly. This is a bit more specialist than that. So what Arctic Trucks do is they'll cut away the bodywork, the chassis, they'll give it another 40mm of lift and another 40mm of wheelbase, and then put a custom body kit on it so it all makes sense visually. Now, the Toyota LT250, the Land Cruiser, doesn't have a front differential lock, and neither does this. It's just got a rear diff lock and a centre diff lock. But with these tyres and the low ratio gears, it's just a complete mount and go. And it's unfussed. So you just basically drive at things and everything works. So if I just try and get up these rock steps here, which are going up in the other cars, just give it that diesel torque, it just walks up them. Not really missing having a front diff lock, to be honest. Now, if you want one of these, it's 30 grand plus VAT for the conversion. So if you buy a new Land Cruiser, that would make it about 110 grand, which sounds like a lot for a Land Cruiser 250, but it is something very different and incredibly capable. We're having no rubbing of the tyre in the arches, even on full articulation, which we got in the Jeep. Drive shaft. Well, that's a bearing. I think we're going to have to figure out how to get this thing off this trail, which is not going to be easy. I think I better walk back down and see if I can find something with a winch.
Maybe I spoke too soon about not needing a front diff lock.
I was really hoping to get to bed early tonight.
All of which meant by the time we sorted ourselves out, the Defender entered the woods rather late in the day.
The light is fading. We've spent a little bit too long trying to get all these cars down this particular off-road section. So we're now in the dark, in the forest, in a Land Rover Defender Octa. And the interesting thing about the Octa is it's a very much modified Defender. So it's got different axles, different uprights, different mounts, all to cope with whatever off or on-road things will be thrown at it. It's also got forged lightweight wheels and triple ply Goodyears, which are supposed to be more puncture resistant. The thing is, it's still got air springs. And when they're on the top of their off-road mode, it does feel quite stiff-kneed. It kind of relies on its electronics to let it get through things. So one wheel tends to have to spin a little bit, and you have to keep the throttle on so that the car can then crawl through. Once you get used to that fact, it's still a Land Rover. Just have to bump it up here. Be careful where we get it up. It is doing it. It's just not, it's not super happy. But that's because it has other talents. Saying that, once you're used to the way that the Defender works its way around off-road, it is surprisingly good at coping with stuff.
Which was good news, because having lost time with that broken drive shaft, we ended up here. Final obstacle of the day, pitch black, and not wanting to scrape the back bumper of 150 grand's worth of Octa, and our spotter Simon using a torch to check my progress down a treacherous waterfall. Needless to say, with a bit of care, the Octa got through it without any fuss. So, having driven all four, I was mightily impressed. The biggest surprise was actually the Jeep. Yes, it may have the engine of a sewing machine, but with a low-ratio gearbox and mechanical locking diffs, it had the grunt to crawl slowly. Throttle response was lovely and slow, and with the Storm Jeep's improvements, there was an ease to the way it crawled through the terrain that reminded me why Jeeps are so revered off-road. It just needed that extra space on the wheel arch extensions to stop the tyres trying to eat them at full articulation. The Ineos was unsurprisingly a little bit big for our tight lanes. A wide track means you have to be super careful, but the portal axles mean you don't worry about what's underneath, and the Trialmaster's general off-road nous means it's got off-road ability to spare. It may have scrambled slightly, but it never came near to getting stuck. Okay, so it got a bit tippy in the step down, but the drop pressures in the tyres probably didn't help, and to be honest, it walked everything else with ease. On a wider or bigger bit of track, it would be dominant. The Arctic Truck's AT37 Land Cruiser hasn't even got a locking front differential, but again it walked up most of the features without breaking a sweat. No rubbing in the arches, loads of articulation to keep the wheels on the floor, and excellent ride. Yep, it did pop a half shaft on the steps, but it felt like a parts failure rather than something more serious, and maybe I should have backed it off and tried a bit more momentum a second before. But we did get the opportunity to do some winching. The Defender Octa was a slightly strange one. With the airbags at full extension to get the right height and clearance, it was definitely more stiff-kneed than the others, more rally than rock crawl. but nothing actually stopped it, and with more care and spotting, it still managed all the challenges. But it did need more work and time than the others. Saying that, the engine really makes light work of pretty much anything, but it was obvious that this is entirely the Octa's forte.
But this being Top Gear, we thought we'd do something a little bit more childish. So we've come here to an actual Rally GB stage at Sweet Lamb to see what these cars handle like when they go a little bit faster.
Yeah, like that.
And to do that, I brought in some help. Hey Stig, how's it going? You all right? Should we do some rallying? Let's just do it.
So this track is only 3 miles long and mostly gravel, mud and water. So let's see how they do when driven by something that has no need to fill in insurance forms.
So this is the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon edition. They do a more road-biased version called the Sahara. This is about £65,000 as standard, and this Storm Jeep's conversion is about 12 grand. And I have to say, it is coping with this rally stage pretty well. I mean, this thing is very precise, but this car's only got about 270 brake horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. And the interesting thing is, it's actually got the least torque of anything here. Oh, good God. It's a bit all over the place. But Storm Jeeps does a bit more than just slapping on the 2.5-inch lift kit. It's actually putting in a load of relocation arms so that all the suspension actually works properly. But even going through some of the big hits, it seems to be handling the bumps really, really well. Hey! That was sideways into water. Obviously the Stig has some sort of intra-water vision, whereas I can't see anything. He's absolutely fine. Good God! Yep, it's doing pretty well. And so to the Ineos Grenadier Trial Master by LeTech with the portal axles. Now this thing has got a straight 6 BMW engine with a single turbo. It's basically the M140i engine, and it makes 282 brake horsepower, 332 pounds-feet of torque. But this is a much bigger car than a standard Trial Master, so it's a little bit slower to 62 miles an hour, even though it doesn't feel it when you're on a single track road with the Stig driving. And obviously we've got a lot of suspension, so the bumps are basically no problem. The Stig doesn't seem to have a problem with any of this either as well. Good God. And even though I'm terrified, I'm still laughing. Oh, it moves around so much, and because we feel so high, it accentuates all of that movement, so it feels like we're going to tip over, even though hopefully we're not. It just feels like it floats over everything. This is a big hit. Good God. But the portal axles just feel like they're absorbing absolutely everything. The suspension seems to be completely fine. I didn't think we'd be able to go down here very quickly, but then I misjudged the fact that the Stig was driving and he can make anything fast. Brakes, brakes, good God. Here we have the Arctic Trucks AT37. And immediately, the way that it floats over this course is really strange. Now, this car has a 2.8 litre 4-cylinder from the Hilux, and it makes the least power of all the cars here, so it's only about 200 brake horsepower. But it hasn't got the least torque. It's got 369 pound-feet. And the car that has the least torque is actually the Jeep. But the one trick up this car's sleeve is the suspension from a company called R53. Now, R53 suspension are more used to doing Dakar trucks, and that, in conjunction with these tyres, is absolutely magical. That was bouncing me around before, and yet we are floating. And honestly, that's absolutely mental. It feels like a magic carpet. And so to the Defender Octa. This has got a 4.4 litre V8, 626 brake horsepower, quite a lot of torque, and the Stig is basically throwing it around like a really tall rally car. It's very scary. The thing is, this thing has been set up to be a bit more like a Dakar truck. So there's a button on the Stig steering wheel there in the centre of the boss at the bottom, and if you press it and hold it, you get dynamic mode, which is still four-wheel drive, and if you press and hold it, you get Octa mode, which basically sends 80% of the power to the rear wheels. It also disables the stability control. We are going at least twice the speed of any of the other cars. This feels like an actual tall WRC car. That was sideways and water all at the same time. It's basically an ocean-going rally car. This thing will do, oh good God, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. But one of the interesting things which we've just felt is that even though it maintains the car's ride height in Octa mode, it actually ups its damping reserves. So this thing glides along like you wouldn't believe. Now this is £148,000 worth of engineering, but with the different uprights, different axles, different everything, it makes this car feel spectacular.
Righty-ho, time for some summing up. The Ineos Grenadier Trialmaster by LeTech isn't just a snappy name, but basically a Grenadier that's been given the ability to go literally anywhere, as long as it can fit through the gaps. Those portal axles add even more ability to what is already a very solid off-road package, and the tyres also help. It's brilliant, but a little bit specific. We didn't think it would be much good on the rally stage either, but it held its own. It's impressive. The Arctic Trucks Toyota LC250 is all the cool stuff in one package. I love that little Land Cruiser, and the AT37 just takes it to the next level both in terms of off-road performance and looks. It's properly brilliant bounding about off-road with that three-way adjustable suspension, even if it did have a little wobble on the steps. It needs a bit more power to really make things easy, but as a blend of on-road ability and off-road capability, it's hard to beat. The Defender Octa, unsurprisingly, is very good at acting like a rally car on gravel roads because it is basically a tall rally car. It's sophisticated but rugged, fun but useful. It's brilliant. But it's also not got the off-road grindability that the other cars have. It's much less of a dedicated off-roader, but it holds its own in other ways. The real surprise? Or not actually a surprise, to be honest, it's the Wrangler. It walked a lot of the off-road course and then stuck with it on the rally stage. It might not be the most sophisticated on the road, but by crikey it's got gumption. Jeep does good off-roaders, and Storm mods make them even better.
There really isn't a winner here. All four of these have taken very capable standard vehicles and their modifications have just elevated them. They've got very different characters. It just depends what you want to do with them. But there is one that I've got a bit of a soft spot for because it's a bit of an all-rounder, and that's the one I'm going to drive home.